On tonight's edition of the CHGO Cubs-related podcast, the winter meetings loom. Couple signings already on the board. We're hearing about budget, stuff going on at Marquee. Plenty to talk about. We'll break it all down and more on tonight's edition of the CHGO Cubs-related podcast. This is the CHGO Cubs-related podcast driven by Toyota. Let's go places. Good evening, everyone. My name is Corey. I am joined, as always, by Brendan. We are coming to you on Thursday. It is December 4th, Brendan. Not a ton of activity, but one of those episodes, like, we do end up with a lot to talk about. Dylan Cease, since you and I last spoke, Dylan Cease is off the board. There's Alex Bregman rumors again. Marquise cutting a bunch of costs. Bruce Levine says the Cubs have potentially a decent amount of money to spend. A lot going on.
The winter meetings are what, 72 hours away? Who knows? We could be signing a starting pitcher, relief pitcher, probably neither of the guys, but hey, there's a lot to discuss.
Will you be there in the lobby of the winter meeting sharing your graphs and your pitching portfolios?
That would be actually a decent idea.
Hoping to land a job.
Yeah. Have a 38 by 24 printout of my nice new graphs. I like that idea quite a bit.
Great.
See if Jake will pay the bill and fly me out there,
to take a job somewhere else.
Yeah. I'll support it. He's a good guy.
Great. Yeah, I mean, plenty going on. It is one of those times where, again, like Dylan Cease, I think the big names so far off the board, still kind of in that very early rumor territory. We're getting, the very fun reports like Kyle Tucker's at the Blue Jays facility in Florida. We're at that stage of the offseason, folks. But each year is different, but typically when we get around the winter meetings, stuff really starts to ratchet up. We're kind of getting further away from some of those smaller roster and contract decisions that teams need to make. And we get to that point where some of these guys want to get deals done. They want to figure out where they're playing. They want to figure out if they're moving, where their family's going to be, all that other stuff. So I would expect things to ratchet up fairly quickly. I suppose the place to start, Brendan, obviously this news a few days ago, but are you heartbroken that Dylan Cease will not be a Chicago Cub? Do you not care at all? I know we had talked about him, I don't want to say extensively, but a good bit, and was certainly a target. I don't know if the Cubs, they hang those dates on top of Wrigley Field for significant seasons and stuff like that. I don't know if they'll hang, top 7 for Dylan Cease. They submitted an offer. I don't know if they'll raise a banner for that, but do you care at all, or have we moved on?
No, I moved on pretty fast. I mean, he was my number one option. So going into the offseason, I was hoping you have some stability, but at the very least, a high ceiling. And now the guys on the market, there's a lot of interesting pitchers, but you look at someone like Framber Valdez, may have the stability, but not the high ceiling. Look at Amai, may not have the stability, but he has a high ceiling. You look at Michael King, a little bit of both, right? Good years in the past, some volatility. Dylan Cease was kind of the perfect match of all of those guys, all those advantages, and now we'll have to figure out what goes next.
Yeah, I think it's early enough in the offseason. There's a lot of options, and I think as we discussed, none of them necessarily perfect, quote unquote. None of them ever are, but certain years there's
John Lester.
This is yeah.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I stand corrected. John Lester is perfect. That's always a good sentiment to carry.
World Series.
Yeah, in 2016 for the Chicago Cubs. He won it multiple times, but he did
with the Cubs. Yeah, got it.
I think the Cease thing is a classic example that we've talked about a lot over the years, where it's early. They have other options. So you want to wait until they built the roster, they're taking the field, and we kind of look at the final product. If they miss on Valdez and King and Amai and they don't swing a trade, and we're kind of sitting here going, hey, wait a minute, different story. But with a lot of potential avenues still out there, I don't know that I had such a strong reaction to it, but it does represent something we've talked about in the past, Brendan. Like, you want a front office to have limits. No matter how much we yell about it, and even for the teams that it sort of seems like it is, the resources aren't literally unlimited.
Well,
And
people are going to hate you for bringing this up, but continue.
Just saying, like, for any decision that they're making, you want them to say, they have to have the ability to say, at this point, we don't think this is smart, or we don't like this, or this doesn't fit with how we're building the organization going forward. The counter to that, though, and I'm not, you know, you know what camp I'm in. I'm in the camp of spend all the money every time, but it's that balance of, are you comfortable with this? Your organization view this as a good decision, a good contract, etc., or you don't get the player. And we've talked about that a lot. And I think about that a lot, you know, as people are going to continue, especially when he signs likely somewhere else with Kyle Tucker. Like, same thing with that trade. People can freak out about the price the Cubs paid. They can talk how they felt the deal played out, but you had two sort of options presented to you. You can be the team that has Kyle Tucker and puts him in the middle of your lineup, or you're saying, ooh, glad we didn't do that because we kept these prospects and this other stuff. Same thing with something like Dylan Cease. So it's all to say, if you, dear viewer or listener, like that deal and are comfortable with that deal, everyone's going to have a different premise on that. And I think it's okay for the front office to have their boundaries and limits. But as we look forward to the rest of the offseason, Brendan, at some point, right, if you wait around for all the deals to come to you and for them to fit your model of how you want them to be, you run the risk of not getting anybody. So at some point, you have to find that good balance of, what do you think is smart? What do you think is a good risk to take? And, you know, we don't want to be left without the player. If you're not willing to meet the market because you're uncomfortable with the market, well, then you're not getting any of these.
We've learned over the years, though, that Jed Hoyer is never going to meet the market. He'll wait last second, quite literally the last nanosecond, to get the deal he wants. So if we've learned anything, it's that when the deal is made, it's on Jed Hoyer's timeline. Now, the question I have as the winter meetings coming up is, Amai has not made his city visits yet. So to expect that a signing will happen during the winter meetings, at least for the starting pitching side, may be optimistic. Maybe the relief market's viable, but to expect...
Well, but he also does have a deadline.
He has a deadline of January 2nd, but he has not designed his overall domestic city visit schedule yet. So they're going to go into the winter meetings, and they're going to have this looming contract of maybe $150, $200 million of an asking price. Several teams will be interested, including the Cubs, and they will have to decide, okay, do we go with King now, Michael King, at $80 million, or risk having Amai's market come down, or do we wait this out and let's try to get Amai at our price? But the risk is, well, King may get signed, or Framber Valdez may get signed. That's the delicate balance they're weighing.
Yeah, and interesting too, even just reading like kind of the tea leaves, you know, I think from a overall space perspective, it seems like Michael King, that sounds like the favorite. If you're just sort of reading the rumors and stuff like that, he seems to be connected most to the Cubs. And you're reading stuff too that, like, it seems like Jed is a big fan of Amai. Some in the organization are big fans there. So it's interesting to even try to handicap what they're going to do. But
then I think you start thinking, though, just to interrupt, you start thinking, well, if they were really in close to the price tag of Cease, then Framber Valdez, who is projected to make maybe the most money of everyone on this market without Cease there, maybe Framber Valdez is someone they significantly consider as well at that high price tag.
Perhaps I'm a little inside baseball for you folks, like
Yeah.
just in communicating with dear Dr. Miller here. I got a sneaking suspicion that he kind of likes Framber
Well,
for the move. It
we're
seems
gonna get into it. I
that's
don't
how
want
the
you to.
dialogue is going
I
personally.
don't want you to pigeonhole me into that decision, but we'll talk about it later on. Okay?
Yeah. I'm not supposed to talk about our texts on the air or something
No.
like that. No, but so I think the one thing I take, and part of the reason that I started the conversation with the, like, you want to have your limits, you want to be able to set what you feel is right, right? It's never going to be a fair standard to hold the front office to, like, we'll just do whatever it takes on every player on every move. They're not going to. They can't. Like, that's just the reality. We want them to, but that's not how the Chicago Cubs are operating. So that's kind of why I start with that kind of logic. But I do think the Cease thing gives us optimism, perhaps, especially paired with the Bruce Levine report. I think he said anywhere from maybe 50 potentially million more to spend. Now, do they spend all of that? Is that the exact number? Is that just, what he's hearing? Is that a mouthpiece thing? Who knows, right? But it sounds like they did submit an offer for Cease, a competitive one, not one that got the deal done. And I know there's plenty of people that are sick of hearing that they tried, or that they submitted the fourth best offer, or that they knew deferred money was going to be involved, but they don't want to do that, which like might disqualify them sort of from the jump, even if their present value offer is good. But they did submit a potentially hefty offer. They've got money to spend. And so as we go forward in this offseason, I do have a belief, kind of when we were in that offseason and we felt they were going to get a shortstop and we didn't really know who, and some of the offers were crazy and they didn't submit on some, or they were, lower in the totem pole on others. They're going to, I feel pretty confident that they're going to spend on pitching, Brendan.
Yeah.
They were willing to do it with Cease. Sounds like they submitted a robust offer, whether it was 5th out of 7, whatever, it doesn't matter. And it sounds like they've got money to spend. So I do feel reasonably confident that they are going to spend a fairly significant amount of money upgrading the top portion of this rotation. Who it is, we'll see. And of course, look, like, markets can get crazy and all of that, but they seem committed to addressing that part of the team, and they do seem willing to commit some decently sized money to do it.
We're hearing they're also maybe interested in Alex Bregman. So I bring up Bregman not to detract from the pitching conversation,
Sure.
but just to really dial in on that they are seriously considering spending upwards to that first tier of the luxury tax around opening day. That was a report from Bruce Levine. He said maybe 50 to 60 million. If you go to MLB COTS, which they project the CBA luxury tax payroll, they have 49 million right now. So you're in this window of probably a range of 45 to 60 million before you start getting penalized. So the question I have before we go into the winter meetings is, does that money get spent before opening day? If it doesn't, how much of a pillow do they leave open to trade and acquire guys at the deadline? And is there going to be a potential repeat of last deadline where they did leave open that 10 to $15 million pillow, but they didn't trade for guys at the deadline? So ultimately, that money that we thought was being saved by Bellinger, it never really got spent on personnel because the moves and the market didn't materialize.
Yeah.
As Jed projected.
Well, and how does the front office react to that, right?
And Jed did say in his postseason presser that the market was hot and he maybe learned from that experience, which then lends me to believe, okay, well, then they may jump the market and spend money so that does not happen again this trade deadline.
Yeah. So we'll take our first ad break here in a second, but I think especially related to the money, like, again, as always, wish they spent $500 million, right?
How many times have you said that over the past
billion,
5 years?
Because Brendan, I can't have people acting like I'm defending their lower payroll.
It's like
everything gets taken out of context, and I just won't allow it. You know what I mean? Like, it's got to be clear. I'm sure you guys are sick of it.
I know it's like remember
right?
you had a keyword juxtaposition 10 years ago. This is like your new keyword, but it's a phrase.
Listen, it's got to be clear. But I think the exercise is, if it's 50 to 60, if that report is true, if it's anywhere close to that, how do they use that money to accomplish the goals that we want them to accomplish? It doesn't really serve us to sit here and say, hey, that's not enough, whatever. It would be significantly more than anybody in your division is spending. And it ought to get you to the point that you want to be at, which
I
is
just almost passed out. I saw Nico trade come across
yeah,
my
not
text
that
message.
Nico,
Holy
not that Nico.
Jared, what are we doing over
Yeah.
here, man? I just saw
not
lights.
that Nico
I
minor league
almost
deal.
just passed out. Oh my
So yeah,
God.
that's what I think when we come back from the break, we continue to talk about pitching, but kind of looking at if they potentially have even close to that amount of money to spend, how do they do it? How would they best be served to do it? And then kind of squaring that, as we've already kind of laid out, with the idea that seems like they want to invest heavily in top of the rotation pitching. And how serious might this Bregman rumor be, as it's a second off season where we're hearing such a thing? But let's take our first ad break here. We'll come back and we'll keep talking about the Chicago Cubs offseason.
Okay, hey Cubs fans, Toyota has 25 vehicles with available all-wheel drive and four-wheel drive. The RAV4 has legendary versatility, and the Grand Highlander's adult-sized third row is for real, and the Tacoma's wild side comes standard. From job size to camp size and game nights, there's an all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive Toyota to get you there in style. Find yours today at toyota.com or visit your Chicagoland Toyota dealer today. Toyota, let's go places. Also become a CHGO diehard and upgrade your fandom today. Get access to our exclusive written content, a free t-shirt, plenty of discounts on future merch and events, plus access to our CHGO Discord lounge where we all hang out and talk Chicago sports and so much more. Go to allchgo.com for the latest information. Now you can join the thousands of CHGO diehards in our community. We cannot wait to connect with you on an ever greater level. Brunt Workwear, Brunt work boots, they're the real deal. They're completely waterproof, rain, mud, standing water, you name it, your feet stay dry. And what I love is they're built for pretty much any job site. Oily shop floors, farm fields, construction, the warranty track at Wrigley Field. You can put these things through anything. But Brunt is not just boots. They've got heavy duty work pants, weather-resistant jackets, a whole lineup of tough gear that actually keeps up with you. The founder, Eric Girard, he grew up blue collar, listened to his buddies who were sick of big brands turning into fashion labels, and built Brunt for real workers. Every boot is named after the guys he grew up with. It's authentic, and you can even feel that in the gear. And with the temps dropping, what is it, snowing like crazy over there in Chicago, and the holidays around the corner, treat yourself or the hardworking guy in your life to try something that actually lasts. Our listeners get $10 off the entire order with code CHGO at checkout. That's bruntworkwear.com, code CHGO. Order today and let them know you heard it here on the show.
All right, folks, back with you. I mean, you want to talk pitching? You want to talk Bregman all together?
I want to talk pitching. We'll get to Bregman, but I want to talk pitching.
Yeah, so I think, again, there's always potential trades to explore. We heard that they were looking into Jesus Luzardo last offseason, but didn't like the medicals. We heard constant rumors of multiple pitchers coming from the Marlins, Alcantara and Cabrera. Never materialized, but was something the Cubs were basically every day connected to as we got to the trade deadline. So there's definitely that avenue. But as we were talking about in the first segment, they reportedly made an offer to Dylan Cease. You've got guys like Framber Valdez, Michael King, Tatsuya Imai coming over from Japan. Who am I forgetting? Suarez.
Ranger Suarez, correct.
Yeah, Suarez. So some of those names being tossed about, and certainly, some of them, maybe not necessarily number one guys, but would certainly add to the top of this Cubs rotation and give them more stability in their rotation. Now that Cease is off the board, do you have a preference? And how do you take the Cease offer and the reports potentially of budget being there to make some significant moves this offseason, even if it's not a flurry of them, and kind of square that with the available options here?
It's difficult to have one guy you're completely married to in terms of being 100% confident in the selection. The question I want to pose to you before we get into this is how confident are you in the Cubs' current roster in terms of a win range? If I were to ask you, okay, what is their average win projection? Would you say 88 wins, 90 wins? If I asked you what the floor is and the ceiling is, would it be 82, 97? Where would you say the Cubs are right now?
Current roster?
Yeah, current roster and a reasonable offseason. Where would you say the Cubs would be, rather, entering opening day?
I mean, like the middle feels slightly under last year.
Okay, so like 80. Let's do 80.
Mid to high 80s sounds about right.
Okay, let's do 89 wins. Okay, 89 wins by projections. That seems about right. Okay, we'll do 90. Let's just round up 90 wins. So if you take that 90 win and you think like a front office executive, they've told us from Seattle, Carter Hawkins has told us that they're looking at 2032, right? The range of outcomes is plus or minus 7 wins. That's the 30th percentile outcome they always talk about. So if you're projected at 90, you may be thinking about this from a front office executive standpoint as 83 to 97. All right. So your bad case outcome right now is an 83 win team. Is that a playoff team, Corey? Is 83 wins playoffs?
Probably not. It could be, but probably not.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you the question. You have 3 pitchers, Framber Valdez, Tasuyo Amai, and Michael King. Which one of those pitchers elevates you to 85?
With the most safety, certainty?
Yeah.
I mean, Valdez probably.
Okay.
Right?
Do you want to make the playoffs next year?
No.
Okay. So this is where I'm thinking about this, right? So the reason I talk about this range is because right now, this is not the 2023 Cubs. It's not the 2015 Cubs. It's the 2026 Cubs. If this were the 2023 Cubs, I'm playing ceiling. So the guy I would want is probably Michael King. He is the highest range, the highest ceiling, given what he did in 2024. If I'm talking about 2015, after signing John Lester, well, I'm looking at the future payroll. It's not bogged down by certain guys. I have my stability in John Lester. I got my budding MVP in Chris Bryant. I'm going to go with a combination of projectability, spending money, and ceiling. But the 2026 Cubs already have that foundation in place. They have a range where if your bad case outcome hits, you're missing the playoffs. Your roster is also turning over next year. I need to make the playoffs next year. So I look at this team, I think, okay, which guy is most likely to ensure that the bad case outcome does not cause the Cubs to miss the playoffs? And going forward in 2027, when the finances and the rosters do turn over due to free agency, Nico, Ian Happ, Seiya, which pitcher is also most likely to give you value in 2027? Well, then the answer, I can't make a compelling argument. It's not Framber Valdez. I can say I'm more interested and intrigued by Tasuyo Amai, and I understand the high ceiling Michael King, but I can't say for certain those are the guys that will make the difference. I can say I'm more confident, and I can actually tell you that by adding Framber Valdez, you get more certainty raising that floor and ensuring your playoff potential with Framber Valdez. And because of that, I'm leaning towards preferring Framber Valdez, given the current situation they're in.
Wow.
And I get all the clubhouse stuff. I get all that. Listen, I'm not in the clubhouse. I understand all the different reports. I guarantee you Jed Hoyer is doing his investigative reporting over there. Yeah. So I feel like I just can't make an argument against Framber with this roster.
Yeah, we've talked about that. I do, as we keep going here, hello to everybody in the live chat. I feel like the chats weren't showing up right away. But hello to everybody. Also, our dear friends at Bleacher Nation.
Look at that.
Who have hopped in the chat.
Hello,
I was listening to Michael and Brett earlier this afternoon.
So
that's where I steal all my talking points from.
I know. I just say everything they say on their show.
It's tough to disagree with you. I think that's it, you have to. It's interesting because you have to square, I think, your own personal belief of is the best decision to approach the market for the immediate impact in 26 because you do have so much turnover potential in the roster in the coming years. Is that the right way to go about making a decision like this? Because of course the organization doesn't exist only in 2026. I'm curious about the cross up stuff. If they made the move, as we've said, you'd have to imagine that they have done like a lot of due diligence to figure out that that is not something that is like bothersome. As we talked about, like the Cubs have had some bad apples in their clubhouses over the years, but they do generally do a pretty good job of cultivating a good culture. We hear that from the guys that come on 1-year deals. We've heard that from coaches. Like and you can just see it. I think it's visible at times. We've had teams in our lifetime where it did not seem like the clubhouse culture was very good or very united. And I think it's tangible, when that is. So you'd have to trust them there. I also think it's interesting to pair this, Brendan, like it doesn't seem necessarily possible money-wise unless you were really able to finesse it to if you're spending big on a pitcher, the Bregman stuff doesn't really seem to track with the financials that we seem to be working with. Now that's not
You
necessarily.
can't sign Bregman for 30 million annual average value, then go out and sign Framber Valdez for 30 million.
Presumably not, right?
You can't
like with
do it.
The information there, or at the very least, you're doing like basically literally nothing else. So it just doesn't seem possible. So is that also something to square? Like, how are you spending your money to address the rotation? Do you want to make significant additions in any other place? This entire time, it's felt like their priority was going to be on pitching and whatever they feel is that best investment to make in that department. That's what they're going to do. I got to be honest with you. I'm intrigued by all of these options. I tend to feel like, I don't know, slightly differently than you. I think
So who are
in
you
my
going to pick?
head,
Who
lean
you picking?
towards the ceiling rather than the safety net. But I understand the risk in that, especially when you have a rotation with a decent number of guys that have some risk associated with them, whether it's health or age or anything like that.
How many more wins do you want, right? Like realistically, think about this. And I'm not trying to persuade you either way. Your mind's made up. I understand it. But Framber Valdez has pitched nearly 30 starts for the past 5 years with an ERA range of 2.5 to 3.5. What do you want? You want 35 starts with 1 ERA?
He would very much enjoy pitching with this Cubs defense behind him. I think, they would reap a great benefit from that. I think all of these are great additions.
And this is not to ding a eye, by the way. I want to make this clear. From a stuff perspective, I would enjoy watching Amai the most. I think he's the most fun to watch. It's a different conversation than saying I have more confidence in Framber because of history, because of what we know to project value. It's a different conversation.
Yeah, I understand that. I think either way, look, I think all of these are really solid additions, and I do think that that's sort of the weight here. You can look at the stuff of the guys, and it obviously varies. It is a question of, do you want to opt for, quote unquote, more safety, so to speak? Or do you take that risk and understand, like, hey, like with someone like Amai, we've talked about that. He attacks the zone a lot at times in his career, has had higher walk totals. And there's question, how does that fastball play when you come over to a different league? How does his secondary stuff play? How does he adjust? Of course, those are big questions. But I think it's a matter of, do you like that risk, or are you scared by that risk? And that's going to be up to each and every person. I think all of these guys potentially make the Cubs better. I don't think that that's much of a question, but yeah, certainly there is a greater deal of risk in terms of certainty and the output that you might get when we're talking about just these three guys, right?
I
There's
get it.
obviously more options for them to potentially explore. Yeah. And I mean, it is interesting. I do feel like, again, reading through the rumors, it feels like King is the guy that the media and some of the, predictors feel like the Cubs are
We'll talk
going to
about it.
be the most aggressive for. Kind of like a lot of the connection to Amai, man. I like the idea that, Jed maybe has a guy and he's convicted in it. I think that's what you want from your president of baseball operations,
Okay.
and like, not to like just trust him blindly, but like,
Sure
I
sounds
think
like it.
sometimes you have to, like, he wants his guy, like, all right, I'm into it, like, go do it.
Let's take our
We got
ad
to hit our
break
second
here.
ad break here. We'll keep
We'll
talking
talk
about
more.
pitching,
Yeah.
talk about Alex Bregman and how the Cubs hopefully spend this rumored money that they have to spend.
All right. If you're looking to add a little extra excitement to the games this week, Bet365 has you covered, because whatever the moment is never ordinary at Bet365. Right now, new customers get $200 off in bonus bets when you bet just $5, win or lose. Now, here's where I love about Bet365. The boost and early payouts are legit. Football fans, this one's huge. Bet365 has an early payout offer for both the NFL and college football. So if your team goes up by 17 points, you win instantly. Straight bets get paid out, and parlays keep rolling with the leg marked as a winner. Baseball fans, once the season rolls along, guess what? You're covered too with their MLB early payout. If your team goes up by 5 runs, your bet cashes instantly. Simple, clean, no sweat in the Cubs bullpen, coming in the 5th inning, walking guys like crazy. And here's the big news: this playoff season, Bet365 is giving new customers $200 in bonus bets when you bet $5 win or lose. Just download the app, use code CHGO365 to deposit $10 and place a $5 bet. You get $200 in bonus bets either way. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or over. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, help is available. Call 1-800-GAMBLER, in-app only. I cannot wait to catch Cubs games again, whether it's going to spring training in Arizona or a sunny day at Wrigley. There's nothing like that first crack of the bat. But getting those tickets, not so fun. Queues, logins, prices that suddenly jump at checkout. All I want to do is be in the stands, cold drink in hand, taking pictures of my hot dogs with tomatoes. That's why I use Game Time. It gives the advantage back to me, the fan. It's the fastest, easiest way to grab amazing seats in just a few taps. My favorite parts, zone deals. You pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and you save a ton. Plus, every ticket is 100% guaranteed and backed by the Game Time guarantee. So you know you are covered. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets. NBA, NFL, NHL. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Tap, ticket, go. That's Game Time.
All right, Brendan, back with you here. Curious, like, let's say they make that move. Let's say they sign Framber Valdez.
Sure.
They've spent that money. Are you good in the rotation at that point?
I think so. I mean, you look at, I have the depth chart projected payrolls right now in playing time, rather. So if you look at what their percentage of innings are allotted to, right now, without any signing, on the right, you see Matthew Boyd, Jameson Taillon, Shota Imanaga, Cade Horton, Colin Ray, Justin Steele, Javi Assad. 7 guys right there. You add in one of those pitchers you're talking about, Michael King, Framber Valdez, Amai. Those are 8 pitchers. I feel pretty confident that of those 8 guys, you're going to meet the innings numbers you need. Now, you can think pessimistically. You look at Matthew Boyd. You think, oh, the age is going to catch up to him. You think more pessimistically, maybe Justin Steele needs more time to recover. Maybe Colin Ray's age catches up. Cade Horton has some setbacks, right? That's the pessimistic point of view. And that's precisely why that a lot of the current projections for the Cubs pitching, they don't really have the Cubs' overall win projections high for this current staff. That's why I also would like to add some stability, because you're talking about ceiling, right? The ceiling for Cade Horton's really high, I think. Justin Steele ceiling's pretty high. I think Shota Imanaga's ceiling's pretty high. I want stability. I want that John Lester type certainty, and no one's John Lester. Don't get that misconstrued with Framber Valdez. But if you look at the projections from all these guys, that's the tightest and the highest for a team where a bad case outcome is missing the playoffs.
Well, and, as an aside, we certainly know that Framber is not John Lester. If you go back and look at some of those conversations, Framber, throwing the ball deliberately at his catcher, David Ross was the one yelling at John Lester. They've told us that many times. So.
Now to be fair, they asked that catcher, I forgot his name, did he throw you on purpose? He said, absolutely not. Me and Framber were actually very good friends. That was his catcher. Again, I'm not defending it, right? But I feel as if we're talking about Framber as he's in my backyard every single day where we're having conversations. I don't know what happens. So I'm approaching this in a way that the front office has done their due diligence, and that's not a problem.
I think you have to operate that way.
You have to.
You have to trust them on that. It would just be unfathomably stupid to make that move and have it be like a clubhouse issue, and everybody's
well, a clubhouse issue too, but also like as he ages, you have to make adjustments, right? You've seen it from everyone in the Cubs organization.
I think Carson Kelly can take him. I don't think this is a concern.
Oh, Carson Kelly can take anyone, man. Yeah. He looks bigger than Barry Bonds on steroids.
So, all right, we've broken down these pitchers a lot. I think we spent a lot of time on these pitchers in past episodes and stuff like that. So we can keep talking about pitching, but I do want to at least address the Alex Bregman sized elephant in the room. Again, these are just rumors that get tossed out. The Cubs have interest, right? Congrats. A lot of players. I have interest with them re-signing Kyle Tucker. It doesn't mean that anything is going to happen.
You do.
Yeah. So, but second off season in a row that we've heard this come up. We know the front office likes him. This is a guy that, I think they've always liked and been interested in. And as we've highlighted plenty of times, only so many areas, if you did want to upgrade on the offense, which again, doesn't sound like it's necessarily their priority, but if you did want to do it, third base and not necessarily just committing it all to Matt Shaw is outside of a strong platoon guy potentially at first base, or bringing in a full-time DH or something like that. There's really not a lot of avenues for them to do that. So squaring it all together, when we have at least reported evidence that they've submitted a big offer for a starting pitcher, they potentially have around maybe $50 million to spend if they want to act like even kind of a big market team. And hearing these rumors, how do you kind of square all of that? Do you think that there's any actual smoke here, or just connected to a player that they happen to like and the contract won't come to them, as we talked about?
Whenever Mooney and Sahadev talk about players, you pay attention. What they say is true.
That is a good rule.
I can't ignore what they're saying. It's a realistic option they're considering. How that fits in with the current team, it's easy to imagine how it could work. It's also easy to imagine how that's restrictive in terms of them going out and getting pitching. So I would be surprised if they end up signing Bregman. But from a value standpoint, in a vacuum, all the free agents we're talking about, Bregman's probably the one that's most likely to live up to the value of that contract. It's difficult, though, to imagine how it works out long term. So if they do sign Bregman, then he's presumably your third baseman starting. Shaw goes into more of a utility role, maybe spells Nico at second base, spells Dansby at shortstop, spells Bregman at third base, DHs, and so on. After 2026, Nico's contract is up. I would love Nico to be a Cub for life. The Cubs may be operating as if they don't know if they can re-sign him. Maybe he wants shortstop money. So Bregman becomes a reserve if that were to happen. That's the logic. I understand, though, a lot of people, including some in this chat, they look at that money, they look at the offense and think, oh, Bregman, he doesn't hit for power. He's not a power bat. Don't we have a third baseman already? And by the way, didn't that third baseman actually lead the National League in second half home runs last year? Why would I spend most of my budget on that? I thought Matt Shaw was fine. In fact, he's pre-arb. He's the flexibility that you should want to have so you can sign starting pitching. That's the pushback there. I'm under the operation that I want projected value. I want to raise that floor, that 83 win floor. I want to raise up to 85, 86. Bregman would accomplish that in the same way that Framber Valdez would accomplish that. How Matt Shaw works out, I think it can work out. You can give him around 400 plate appearances spread throughout the diamond. You can mix and match the DH, the positional side of things. I'm into it. It just has to come with simultaneously improving your starting pitching staff.
Yeah.
And that seems challenging.
I do think that's what it comes down to, is that the math gets tricky. If you sign Bregman and you traded for a starting pitcher, if that was an avenue that you wanted to explore, the math works a little better. But if you're trying to get multiple guys on $30 million contracts, just doesn't sound like that's the money that's available. Now, obviously, that's continually disappointing if they felt that that was the best way forward for the team, but it wasn't there, right? But I don't mind their plan. I agree with the plan of prioritizing pitching. And if that's where the funds need to be spent, then I would support that. I think that's the more pressing need, and it's how I would feel more comfortable in this roster. That being said, as we've talked about a lot, Brendan, I have some real reservations about the offense just in terms of losing Tucker and potential volatility of some of your position players. So
the pushback, though, there is they are
hit me.
third in Fangraph's projected positional WAR without having made one
hang
improvement
the
so
banner
far.
then. Yeah.
I'm just saying, you just said, like, hey, I'm concerned about losing Tucker, but at the same time, they have elevated their projections in the form of PCA, Matt Shaw, Nico Horner stability, and even Carson Kelly's boom in 2025. So the way you're thinking about the offense projection going into 2026 is different than 2025 because you didn't have that base of PCA, Shaw, and so on. It is a little bit of a different conversation.
Sure. Yeah. I agree with you. It is one of those areas where, like it just would be nice if they could address all of it. That's the sort of unfortunate reality that I guess, we're trying to, if that pushes them to what, like 230-ish, something like that, million, something like that. Like, it's not the end of the world, but it does get frustrating sometimes to be trying to push that roster to the point that we're talking about in some of these projections, but kind of having to reel it back because the math doesn't work.
I mean, we keep getting asked about Schwarber. From your perspective, Schwarber, realistic option?
I can't see them tying up so much money in a DH. I just can't see it. Yeah. Just the way this team is structured, I just don't think that is how they go about this. Look, would I like him hitting 45 homers at Wrigley Field? Sure. But I just don't see it. I just don't see them tying up so much money in a DH only player with the way that this roster is constructed.
Well, especially for 2026 too, right? Like you have Sia coming off the books, Half coming off the books, Nico, and so on. So you want that flexibility that, hey, if you have to fill right field or left field or second base, you may want to sign multiple guys that can DH. And if you have some guy just clogging up the hole in DH, even though he's hitting 50 home runs, it does limit your flexibility. That would be the way the front office may be approaching it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, hey, in an ideal world, bring in Bregman, bring Kyle back, go get Framber. Like, yeah, sure. But, just in terms of like what they're working with, I just would be surprised if that's the avenue that they went. I would also imagine, particularly for him, like, I don't know how strong that market's going to be, but you would think that there are teams that fits a lot more clearly.
Of course.
Like, we need a DH only that can just bang some home runs. It's just not really where the Cubs are at. I don't know that they're best served by spending such a chunk of their money on that, but I wouldn't hate it. Look, I want the team to get better, right? Like, however they decide to do that.
There's every episode is the simplistic analysis you
It
give.
is.
I want the Cubs to be good. That's just, really, really,
Yeah.
really telling. That's deep analysis over there.
That's what I want, Brendan. That's what I want for Christmas. So,
Okay.
yeah. But I ultimately, I do. I mean, I was into the Bregman thing last year, and
Does the
it's
way does his performance in the second half give you enough reason to trust that you don't need to improve the positional side, specifically third base? Like, let me pose this question to you. Like, going forward, is there significant concern that in 2027 and 2028 you may need a different third baseman?
well, I think not. I really don't want to put it like all on Tucker, but I do feel like losing that does somewhat change my answer, right?
So you are willing to take the risk and having Shaw continue to progress if you had the offense stability in a different position.
Yes.
And right now we don't have that.
Yeah, and I think, too, the other thing, and I apologize if you mentioned this and I just didn't hear it, but like the other thing too, like I like the idea of Shaw potentially being like a super utility guy, hopping around, but so much of his value was how good he was at third base, and that was clearly a
I
reason that
know.
they stuck
I gotta
with
be
that
honest with you.
runway.
I don't know if I like that idea. Like, I like the idea, but from a DH
In my head, I'm
perspective,
thinking of that in terms of like, hey, Bregman's here now and Shaw gets to keep playing. That sounds fine.
yeah. But
Yeah.
but I'm thinking about the DH spot if you have Shaw and you have Bregman, right? Like, your DH spots, if you slot those two guys in, is going to be a 330 to 340 weight on base average guy with defensive versatility. That's fantastic. Don't get me wrong, right? But a lot of the value when they're in the lineup, both Bregman and Shaw, is tied to their defensive value. Bregman's a great hitter, 90% whiff rate, squared up rate, chase rate. But a lot of those balls don't get hit high in the air. A lot of them don't end up going for extra base hits. There is a limit to his offensive production, and that's why his offensive range of projections, like a 330 to 350 weight on base average. He's not that super high slugger. A lot of the value is a combination of defense and offense. So if you sign Bregman in some way, it does become a little bit redundant with the ceiling of Matt Shaw. I'm talking about ceiling now. The ceiling for Matt Shaw, his overall WOBA in the second half was 357. He was one of the most productive offensive third basemen. So you risk some redundancy there. If you sign Bregman, a lot of that is going to be tied up into how you project 2027, I think. A lot of this is not how you project 2026 necessarily.
Okay. How about signing Bregman, trading Matt Shaw for a
I'm
starting
cool with
pitcher?
that. So you trade Matt Shaw for Joe Ryan. That's always like the conversation that comes up. So you trade Matt Shaw for 2 years of Joe Ryan, who has a similar unique fastball shape as some of the guys we're talking about, even to some degree, not perfectly, but even right? So you you trade a pre-arb guy for a pitcher that makes under $20 million. You mitigate the risk that way. Yeah, I'd be into that. I would be into that. Because to me, like, if you compare just Framber versus Bregman, like, the lower risk profile is going to be Bregman, right? Like, there's no doubt about that. So if you also compare the risk profile of Matt Shaw versus Joe Ryan, well, the risk profile is going to be more on Matt Shaw. So if you can somehow get the lower risk in Bregman, get the lower risk in Joe Ryan, that may be the way they go about doing this. Difficult to match up, though.
Yeah. Always easier said than done in terms
Right.
of, the trades. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think my thing with the offense is it's just hard to shake a little bit of concern is too strong a word, but at least just having in the back of the head, as we've discussed before, losing such significant production from Tucker, obviously mostly in that first half, the insane start from Carson Kelly, and then you look at the team as a whole in the second half, around middle of the pack in the league, slightly above league average offense by WRC plus as a group, and I think like 13th in baseball right, in the second half, just in overall offensive value. So losing Tucker, and just again, like, I believe in these guys a lot, but as we've talked about, like, if Michael Busch is closer to the second half 116 WRC plus version versus the first half 140 WRC plus version, PCA somewhere in the middle of his two extremes. Guy we're talking about, Matt Shaw, was great in the second half. He was not great in the first half. Is that closer to somewhere in the middle of those things? And again, that's not to suggest that like other guys can't break out, or like, trust me, I'm sitting here hoping that PCA puts it all together and has that stable, production for the entire season that we saw such significant flashes of. But it is hard, Brendan, for me to shake a little bit of reservation. I agree with the notion that they can prioritize pitching and make this starting rotation
But you want to
stronger.
insert more volatility with the other pitchers besides Framber. That's the cognitive dissonance that you have. You just talked about pitching and you want to improve pitching and you're concerned about the volatility of the offense, but at the same time you want to accept a more volatile pitcher. Make that make sense to me.
No. No.
Right? I hear what you're
What
saying.
I mean on the offense, and it's certainly not to say like I'm not sitting here saying like, oh well, just Alex Bregman, boom, it's all solved, like everything is perfect, right? He's an aging guy, like you never know, stuff like that. But I do, yeah, I just have a little bit of trepidation. I don't think they're going to run it back on offense, even if they signed Valdez and they spent a bunch of money, continually building up that bullpen, and maybe they just supplemented the bench and had a stronger bench going into the year than they did last year, which of course was dreadful for the majority of like that first portion of the season. But the risk that the offense, I don't think there's risk that it's bad. Like don't get it twisted, but just closer to average or just has those valleys, I do think is there. And it's, again, it's not like just, oh, they're losing Tucker, but yeah, man, like a guy that was at the beginning of the year on a 10-win pace, like certainly helps lift the rest of the offense. And without that, some volatility across it, you want to hope that like Hap doesn't have such an extreme valley like he did last year. Seiya, around that All-Star break, coming out of it, like some of those periods for some of these guys were dreadful.
I mean, the Seiya one was just absurd.
And is it different if that doesn't happen at the exact same time for like four of their best hitters? Yeah, probably. Like timing, sequencing, certainly a part of it. But it's just harder for me to shake that, Brendan.
I don't know how you can
and we
improve
talked
that.
about the foundation being so good. We do talk about like them being the Chicago Cubs and having the ability, if they'd like, to act like it a little more. And like, I feel good about the offense, but I think we could feel better. And that's just always going to make me a little nervous. And I just don't think is necessarily a position that they should be in.
We entered the playoffs last year with, I know Kyle Tucker was not 100%, but replacing Tucker with Bregman still may not make you the happiest from the run production standpoint anyway.
Sure.
I don't know if this group is fixable to the degree you need them to be fixable for how you fan. Maybe this is just who they are. Their profile is always going to be driven by the Alfonso Soriano extreme types, right? That may be who they are, and we just have to live with it for the next year, turn it over in 27.
Well, and look, that is why I keep leading with like I'm good with their priority being pitching. I like that being the plan. Load up on it, replenish your bullpen. You've done a great job of
It's
that.
the most volatile.
And you have continually made an effort, to have a very strong defense and take the benefit in terms of run prevention that can have on an organization, and being one of the better teams at that. They won a championship doing that. So I am fine with that being the priority. I just don't want it to get lost in the shuffle that like I do want them to invest in this offense still. If it's not at that absolute, star level, even the same level that we're talking about, a potential starting pitching addition, I think that's okay. But I do think in some of the conversations about this offseason and about this team, it's getting glossed over a little bit. that there is potential risk. Again, I don't think there's risk that the offense is bad. I think there's risk that at least for periods, the offense is a bit more pedestrian, call it.
The question that always comes to my mind is how much meaningful patterns exist to say, okay, say Suzuki, the streakiness is going to cost so-and-so this many wins. PCA's tale of two halves is going to cost you, one win, right? Like, I don't know if there's much signal in the variability of how guys go from month to month. I'm curious about that. And if that is in fact measurable and meaningful, then to your point, you may want to consider trying to convince one of these guys who has a no trade clause to move on. If you're really intent on improving or giving yourself more confidence about the month-to-month stability, then having an anchor like Seiya Suzuki may never appease you. This is someone who's always been like this. Because if you want to improve pitching, at the same time, you want to improve the middle of the order, you just can't do both. So the question I would have is, can you actually make sense of, say, Suzuki having 2 home runs, and would he be willing to maybe waive that no trade clause? At the same time, the pushback there would be, well, that first half was phenomenal. In fact, one of the best offensive hitters in the league. So why would you want to trade that ceiling away and instead just add to it? I do share the concerns you have. I'm not happy with how Seiya performed in the second half. I'm a little curious about PCA's second half. I have less concern than you do about Ian Happ. I have less concern that most fans do about Dansby Swanson. That's who they've always been. I'm actually surprised how optimistic and impressed I am with Matt Shaw's second half. I went into the offseason expecting to dive into his numbers, to be taken back that he may have gotten some luck and fortune. And in fact, it was the opposite. I thought he actually made improvements that signaled that there's some stability there. But I just don't think it's possible to improve the offense stability the way you want it to be improved. And I think the Cubs have no choice but to enter next season with more or less the profile you have, and then evaluate after 2026.
Fine.
Which honestly is fun.
It is.
You have a roster that is above average at every position.
Yeah, it is. I think ultimately, if we go off the report and they have, 50, 60 to spend, I think it buttons with the same goal that unfortunately we keep having for years and years, which is you gotta, I just want them to go into the season as a prohibitive favorite in their own division. You're not going
to get that either.
Well, maybe not, but that's where you have to figure out how to spend $230 million and be better than the Milwaukee Brewers.
Listen, man. I mean, the way the marker there is 98 wins. You can spend to 98 wins if you accept spending more of that money up front. You're going to have to accept those penalties. You're going to have to maybe eat a loss for a year or two, like what Toronto is doing right now. Maybe a necessity. But the way the Cubs ownership operates, from all we've read, they don't operate like that. They value short-term profits. They have other private equity investors. Who the hell knows how it all works out? But for you to be the bona fide favorite in the division is also not going to happen, Corey. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
I'm sorry, it is.
No, I hear
you. 8 wins.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hear you. It's just, I think that's the goal. That's the next hurdle. The goal is always to win a world championship. But, when you lose the division to the Brewers, when they knock you out of the playoffs, I'd like to enter into the season feeling quite confident that the division is theirs to lose. And what that threshold is, hard to exactly quantify.
I mean, the last 10 seconds, and I'll turn it back to you before we sign off. But the pushback there is, the front office and ownership, they look at the way the season ended. They look at, okay, well, Milwaukee won 97 games. They were the best team in the NL. The Cubs nearly took them to the NLCS. They were, a few innings away from reaching the NLCS.
I mean, it's true.
That's how baseball is.
Yeah. Well, either way, winter meetings coming up. We will keep you covered there. Luke, Joey, we'll have you throughout the week. Keep things tuned to CHGO Cubs. Breaking news, we'll jump on for an emergency show. Yeah, and we'll have you covered throughout the week. So we'll see what Jed has in store. We'll see if the winter meetings bring some action. We'll see if the Cubs spend this rumored money. If they do end up getting a bigger fish in the starting pitching market, and how they position themselves for 2026. So as always, we appreciate you tuning in. We'll be back with you next Thursday. And as always, go Cubs.
We all silly like the mayor.